Welcome! In this video I'm going to show you how I create Chessable courses nowadays powered by Claude. So I developed like 18 programs and they help me. And I want to show you the complete flow, the 12 steps. And I hope that it helps other Chessable authors and chess enthusiasts who build opening repertoires themselves and gives them ideas. So in total there are 12 steps. And why do I use Claude? So for me it has improved the quality of my courses, and at the same time, right, it also gives me more time for things like explanations, annotations, introduction, and model games. So that's, I think, for me the key benefit at this moment. So I've been working now 8 years on the development of courses, and in 2018 I interviewed David Grammarly and John Bartholomew for my chess.com blog when it was just a startup. I published about 10 courses, and yes, so I've been around for a long time, and I have a specific philosophy. So in my philosophy, I build my courses based on a confrontation of what the club player actually plays on Lichess. So I use a Lichess database, rapid and classical 1600 to 2500. That's how I choose my lines, and then I confront it with the Hayek's book, which are top engine and top GM games and correspondence games. I use Stockfish at a depth 30, and so for the repertoire side it's always best available play, and then for the opponent I look at club player games, and the first variation is the variation that you're most likely to face. So these are the 12 steps, right, and I'm going to take you through it, and you can see, right, they're divided in what is still manual, what is Claude driven, what is hybrid, where I work together with Claude, and so you see the complete flow, and you can decide for yourself what is interesting in terms of developing Claude programs for yourself, and perhaps improve your course development. So we start, of course, with opening decisions, right? So I look at the Lichess database, and I look at what scores well, but I also have a specific philosophy, right? I started making those courses for my students, and I wanted them to have unbalanced attacking and fun positions to play. So my intent was not to win out of the opening, so it should be a repertoire that you can learn relatively quickly. But I think it's very important for students to understand, let's say, the trade-off between material and development and space, to learn to attack, to have fun in their games, right, that you continue to play. But at the same time, of course, I don't want to have dubious variations, so they have to be engine-proof and sound. And so, you know, of course, the supercharged Milner Barry, the French, also inspired by Graham Jones and his coffeehouse repertoire. I selected the 4 pawns attacks against the Alekhine. I made a course about the Evans Gambit. And if you look to the Evans Gambit, right, I mean, it's also, like, say, engine approved, so sufficient compensation for the pawn, and very interesting when you are starting out with chess, or when you're an established player, to play that. World champions played it. So all the repertoires are aggressive, principled, and they hold up to engine scrutiny. And I'm going to show you, I'm now developing a new course on the Sicilian, Buster Sicilian, and it's based on the delayed Alapin and the deferred Mara Gambit. And I'm going to show you how it works in practice. And so we go just to the next step. But this is, of course, the first manual step, and Claude has nothing to do with it. That's my course philosophy. So I generate a repertoire tree. And so I'm going to show you just in practice how this works, right? So I'm going, because for a lot of people, Claude the question is, what is it exactly and how does it work? So I started off, right, and it's an important concept so the one part of my paradigm is this confrontation of the Lichess database on the one hand, and then the best play by engines and top GMs. But another very important part of my paradigm is what I call cumulative probability. So you start with e4 and then you look at every black move, if you make a white repertoire. What is the frequency that it's being played on Lichess, and then the cumulative frequency is the product of the black frequencies, right? So you can see here 60 times 70 times 50% is 21%. So I'm trying to select lines which have the highest cumulative probability, and that's kind of an important aspect of my whole generation of courses, right? I try to really find out what are the most played moves, and cumulative probability is very important. And I started off with just saying, give me a tree where all lines, let's say in 1 in 500 games, right? So that's the 0.2% probability are covered. That became a huge tree, and it was hard to look. So I made a kind of a change, and I said, I'm going to make a Sicilian course. It's, of course, the Sicilian is a major undertaking, so I want to have, let's say, 80 to 100 variations. And for e4, c5, d6, let me say I want to have 25 variations. So this is that what I programmed with Claude. Say, give me the 25 variations with the highest cumulative probability. So we're going now to the PowerShell, and I will show you how it actually works. So here we are. And so I'm here. I say Python, and I copy the program, and you can see now it asks me for the opening moves, right? So if I'm in the delayed Alapin, it's e4, c5 to knight f3, d6, right, and then c3. That's my starting moves, right? So you can see build variations that maximize the coverage. So I input the opening moves, then it says, okay, I see that it's a repertoire for white. I can just skip it, or I can confirm it. Then it says, how many variations would you like to build? And I said, let's say the standard you can see is 30, but I say, give me 25. Then the question is, so Lichess is driving the selection of opponents' moves, but what is statistical significant, right? So if I look at this specific opening, e4, c5, knight f3, d6, c3, there are 1.4 million games. And so I say, okay, if it's below, let's say, 100 games, I don't want Lichess anymore to drive the selection of moves, because I don't think it's statistically significant if we start with 1.4 million games. So that's the kind of a hurdle that I put in. What kind of coverage per node do you want? Let's say 90%. How many half moves? What is the minimum depth per variation? Because it can be, right, that at move 8 or something like that, it already says, okay, the probability is pretty low. But I don't want a whole repertoire based on, let's say, variations that are 8 moves. So normally I say, okay, I would like you to extend it to 14. And then it's like, what kind of probability threshold do you want? Okay, so we set 500, 0.2%. the brackets, and then I added a master safety net. So you can say, okay, it's great that you make a repertoire for club players, but you don't want to miss out if there is like a really important game that's played in the master database, a move. If there's a really important move in the master database, that's not being played at club player level, right? And so I said, we have to check whether we're not missing out on main lines in the master database. So I said yes. And you can say, what is the minimum percentage that this move has to be played in the master database to be inserted into this 25 variations? So let's say 50%. And what is the statistical significance on the master games, right? If you have, let's say, 4 games and 3 play a certain move, it's 75%. I don't want to insert it, it's just a rarity. But so you can say, okay, I would like to have at least 20 games before right? So you say, I'd like to have at least 10 games then with this selected move. What is your Lichess token? And then what's the Lichess delay? 1 second. It loads the Hayek's bin that has been converted from CTG to bin. So we can use it. Stockfish, what is the location? What is the depth? I use 30. So one of the accelerations for me is that I have a file and everything is analyzed at that 30. So it's not that I go through the file and every time wait for Stockfish to finish. I just do it once and then I can just read the evaluations, and they're also inserted automatically they're inserted automatically in the variations. So 30 is correct. How many threads do you want to use? 16. And then it says, where would you like to take this? So I say, that's fine. And then it starts building the tree, right? And as you can see, of course, it doesn't know exactly how to get to 25 variations. So we have an algorithm, a bisect algorithm to get to 25. So let me show you now how this looks so I abandoned the program. So let me show you now how this looks in ChessBase. So this is the result, right? So this is, I said 25, but I said you can be 10% under or 10% over. Give me about 25. So one of the things you see here, it also highlights transpositions. So there's one transposition in here. Then the second thing is what we see, right? There's here one line where you can see this is played 63% in the master by masters. So we are here, right? Club players. You can say C takes D4, played in 45% of the cases. And you can see here masters, it's like the best move is castle. So, and then, right, I have to, when I develop the course, think about this move and how I'm going to include it in the overall course. So you can see this is, you could say, the start of my, the output of this program. And now I have, you could say, a base, approximately 25 variations. You can see, of course, right, I wanted to have 25, they gave me 28, but I can cut, right, so you have, let's say, here, this blunder by black, which is played quite frequently in 19% of the cases after the move bishop e2. But after queen a4, we have this double attack and pick it up. But I don't need them to extend bishop d7, knight c6. That will be sidelines, so I will drop certain lines and then I will get closer to my 25. So there's still curation involved, and this is cumulative probability driven. But we're not going to learn in the course, let's say, multiple variations where you're up a piece. And I will just cover that in one variation. But this is the base, right? So now let me go back to the old program because I want to show you how it used to be. Let's say, right, when I was just generating it before and didn't have, let's say, an upper bound in number of variations. So here you can see the course base, right? Based, if I don't say 25, but I say just 1 in 500, expand, 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 you get this. And to be honest, I was getting a bit overwhelmed, right? It's a very nice tree. And this I use now to look for sidelines that have to be included. So this is the first one, right? If I go to the next one, you can see here a lot of information, like at every branch, like how popular it is, and also what the cumulative probability is. So this I use to later on to annotate the 28 variations. So I browse this tree, but you can see it's a lot of information. So this is the analysis detail that has been generated in one go. It's a different program, and you can see here, let's say the parameters that I set. But it's a lot of information. So I'm very happy that I'm now down to the 28. And then finally, right, as part of this, so we saw that there was one transposition in the 28. But this is the transposition viewer for the complete file, right? For if I look at all cumulative probabilities, and you can see that it highlights all the transpositions that are in the position. And if I click one, right, it jumps to the other. So I know where in the file the transpositions are. I know that actually, right, in the final 28, there's only one, what we saw with the Queen E2. But in the complete file, right, with all the detail, you can see that there are multiple transpositions. And of course, it's important when you add sidelines, or in general, when you're in the course, that you are aware which kind of transpositions there are. So this is, you could say, the base, and you can see what I use. So let's go back to the presentation, right? So you saw my paradigm based on Lichess, based on the Hayaks, correspondence games, top GM games, and engine games, and then cumulative probability as an important aspect. I explained this. So now we get, of course, to annotate the coverage tree in ChessBase, right? So we will look, of course, to the ChessBase, to the Chessable standards. You have to, if you have, let's say, in one chapter, if you have common moves, the comments have to be also the same. So in the past that was not so strict, but nowadays, if you have one position, you need to have the same comments. So that's what I currently do in ChessBase. So I just want to show you. Let's go back to the, right? So I entered here, right? Just one comment, and that comment has to be in all the variations that follow, because it's like a common position and it has to have the same comments per the Chessable standards. So before I split this 28 variations in the individual variations, I first create the comments that are shared for the common moves in the tree. And I just inserted here as an example one. So this has not been completely, of course, annotated. So that's the first one. So that's a manual step. So the first step was selection of let's say the basic repertoire, right? I mean, I have the Scandi Slayer, and there, for instance, there's e4, d5, knight f6, bishop e5. That's a choice. Then we get the generation, which I use during Claude, and there are two programs, one that only uses cumulative probability, and one there's a cutoff based on the number of variations with this bisect algorithm. Then, of course, the next thing is that I'd like to have this split into individual lines, right? So if I upload them, so now I have the common comments in my file, I've annotated them, and now I want to split it into individual lines. So let me show you how that looks. Right? So here you can see basically how it splits, right? So here are the 28 variations, and I do it in such a way, right, that I let Claude first of all split them, but also I put in the white field, right, you can see here let's say the headers of the variations, and then split between white and black, because otherwise it gets too long. And then, of course, later, right, I mean, I can massage this a little bit further in Chessable. And, but now I have, you could say, individual variations, and then I can start, every variation has now this common annotation in it. So that's, that I don't have to do that with, like, say, a mass update or anything like that. That's already done by this splitter, and I have headers that I can import into Chessable and that are immediately close to correct, right? I mean, for instance, they don't want it to be too long, so in this case it would be 6 knight takes e4 a1, and then next will be 2, but it becomes immediately clear where you are in the tree. And you can see, right, I mean, also in each variation I conclude with the stockfish evaluation at depth 30. So that is the splitter. And then I add annotations. And like I said, I add annotations also based on the large analysis file. I look there at which variations are important sub-variations to cover in these 28, and then I assert them in these individual lines, right? I mean, I cannot do that before I split, because then those sub-variations would be split too. Okay, so let's return. So here, right, so you can see, basically I add the pair variation, so this is a hybrid, and then sometimes I extend the lines by hand, right? So it can be that variations are very short, and the cumulative probability might be low, but for a club player they need more support, right? So if I go here, right, and there might be variations that are too short, and then I look at, and in general I look at the final position, and I can write, if you, for instance, if you're here, you can say, okay, is this sufficient for a club player to learn this, or should it be extended a bit and more, so the subsequent plan becomes more clear. So yes, so that's also, of course, at the author's discretion. Okay, then this next thing I do, I have these 28 variations, and nowadays, of course, we have Lichess, and now Lichess is 7 billion games, and chess.com is 28 billion games, and they are both available. You can approach them, and for me it's important to understand which lines are challenging for club players. So what I do is I add to the end of each variation the performance on Lichess and the performance on chess.com. So let me show you how that looks. So this is a Claude program, right? So it's, you can see all the split files, right? And if I go into a variation, you can see at the end, so, right, it ends of course here. And then you can see how many games in general there are. You can see now, right, Lichess 71 games. This is being played in 65% of the game. So this is the frequency, and then this is the performance, 77.5, right? And so you can see, and now on chess.com, 78 games played in 48% of the games, and performance is 70%. So I get a feeling, let's say, of the performance of the repertoire in general for club players on Lichess and chess.com. And I just have this added by Claude to this split, and this is just for me an indication, right? Of course you can say, okay, but how do you summarize this, right? So that's where I have a dialogue with Claude, right? So I asked Claude to analyze the performance of the 28 variations and if there are any major differences between chess.com and Lichess. So it says overall the repertoire is strong. You score 69% on Lichess, 66% on chess.com. So we get like, are there major differences between the two platforms? Because if you look to the playing style, on chess.com players play more tactical, and on Lichess they play more positional. So it's interesting to see what the deviations are between the two platforms. And then you can see, right, the genuine soft spots, sub 55% performance on one of the two platforms. And you can see here also, of course, it highlights the statistical significance, because if it's like a low number of games, it's not so important. So overall, right, then it comes to a conclusion. So it says positions where black plays g6 and fianchetto setups, white has a kind of an issue with finding the plan there. So when I make my annotations and go further, right, I pay, of course, specific attention to all these lines where black plays g6 in this repertoire. And then in general, right, so you see here line 18. So it says here, worst in the set, biggest sample, weak on both, right? So I go back to that line. So if I'm just here, right, so I go back to variation 18. And I say, okay, so this position scores poorly after move 6 for white, right? And then, of course, I try to understand why is this difficult for club players. And can I change my variation or extend it, right? I mean, 6 moves, of course, is not sufficient that. But of course, you can see, I mean, one of the issues here is that white would like to play d4, but queen c7 is like indirectly pinning over the c file, so d4 is not possible. You cannot take back with the pawn, because then the queen drops. So this is just a little bit more difficult for white. But based on the feedback that this scores the worst in the complete 28, right, below 50%, I know what I have to do in my course, and that is pay more attention to this variation, and extend it further, explain the plans, and perhaps even change the variation and find a way where white gets d4 in and not gets into this position where there is this queen c7 and queen c2 tension. And so the other thing what we saw is that the variation with g6 needs special attention. Okay, very good. So that's the performance side. So you can see 28 billion games on chess.com, 7 billion games on Lichess. I have it summarized, added to every variation, just for of course, I'm not going to keep them. And then I'm having this dialogue with Claude to basically tell me what the highlights are and where I have to focus. And of course, so that is interesting. And let me go back to the presentation. So where were we? So we check the performance of every final position, right? And then I have this dialogue, and the underperformance gets changed or explained. And you saw here the variation with queen c7, queen c2, and the lines with the g6. And then, right, it's ready for upload. I mean, I make all these annotations, insert the sidelines. And then, of course, the prioritization is very important. So I developed a program based on this cumulative probability and I say basically I'd like to have, of the 28 variations, I'd like to be, let's say 15, I would like to be priority, or 20, and let's say 15. And then the others I'd like to just be plain, right? So then that program has been created. Right? And you can see here all the 28 variations. And you can see which variations to keep. And keep means highlighted as a priority in Chessable. And prune doesn't mean delete, but it means not highlight as a priority in Chessable. So this is like a scientific way, based on the cumulative probability, to decide which variations to elevate based on frequency of play, and which variations to leave as not the highest priority. And there's one specific thing, right? I mean, you can say, oh, this is just based on cumulative probability, but let's say that the cutoff is, let's say, 1%. If you have a branch where the parent has a probability of, let's say, 3%, and it has like 4 children, and the 4 children all have a probability of 25%, the children, right, would all not make the mark, right, would be 0.75%, 3% divided by 4. But we want to keep at least one variation in, because the 3% is very important. So it's not just saying which variations have the highest probability. It's also looking higher up in the tree, that if there are nodes where the probability is above the target, that every node in that sense is being covered. And I would like to have a debate with Chessable, because I think priority setting is very important. I do it based on club players' games, that's one, and I do it based on cumulative probability. And that's also, I want to explain one thing, right? So if you look to the most critical line that we see here, so you see here that was this, if I, right, I mean, imagine that this would be priority. You can see it's like prune, so this was the most critical line, doesn't happen often. I extend it, and then the probability goes down because I extend it in the final position, right? But for me, it is important to look earlier in the tree and not look at the final position, because sometimes as an author you extend just to explain the plan, and it can be that it's a rare occurrence in master games, but that's not important for the course priority. It is like higher in the tree, what's the probability there? So that is also supporting the right? So that supports the prioritization in Chessable. I have just created in Claude a program that tells me which variations are most played on Lichess, and that's what I use. And you can see I import, and of course in the import I just select, right, if you look at the options for import into Chessable, you can use white black, and it has been pre-formatted so it comes in cleanly and even. So one of the things, right, I mean, I have of course all these frequencies, and one of the things of course with the frequencies is, right, how would you like to share that with your users or with your students? So you can see also, if you would like, right, you can see here, I made Claude create these sentences played in 54% of the games, and you see already it's pre-formatted for Markdown, so it's like 54%, and then it's with those double stars to make it bold, and then it automatically generates the next variations cover with the frequencies. So this gives the student a bit of idea of where someone is in the tree and how important this variation is. I'm still not decided upon how useful this is, if it becomes too much. But this just also shows if you have like a tedious work and you would like to include frequencies, that you could build a program to kind of insert that into your annotations, and then you can focus more on the explanations, but these kind of indications where you are in the tree that can help the student are already generated. All right, so where are we? We are in step 6. So we apply the house style, right? We have to, of course, if you look to lists and things like that. And in general, we edit for Chessable Markdown. So you know that I'm a fan of Lichess. So one of the things I do is also now, I look what are critical moves. So critical move is like the most popular move that's being played on Lichess is incorrect. The right move is unpopular. And then I have a gap, right, between the unpopular move and the most played move. And normally I set it at 1. And I look at which move is and I make this into a puzzle, right? And so this becomes like a part of the tactics chapter. And for this 28, I can show you there was only 1. Right, so you can see here how the format looks, right? So the repertoire move is knight takes e5, but you can see in 50% of the cases, right? I mean, white is saying, okay, you know, it's like my knight is pinned, let me just defend it one more time. And you can say, oh, well, this is really a simple tactic, right? But I think for a club player, when you're starting out, to learn it as part of your repertoire, but then to see it one more time as a puzzle, if it's being done, let's say in 7,500 games incorrectly and in rapid and classical, I think that's useful, right? I mean, I think it's not too simple because it's being missed. And this, of course, right, so you can see it gives the delta in evaluation, 4.1, and it's being, so this is 1, and let me go to Chessable, right? And you can see here, so here are the critical moves, and you can see in total, there are like 11 critical moves that came up, and of course here you can see that other variations are there too, right? So you can see here's a very sharp position, and knight b5 has to be played, and that's only played in 6% of the games, and in 49% of the games white plays knight takes c6, right? And the difference evaluation is 2.3. So instead of that you get a winning position, suddenly you have an equal position again. So this is just another way to learn the repertoire based on what people do wrong on Lichess. And it's just automatically generated, and also with the right headers and with the delta. So it's very easy to add that. So those are the priority moves, and they are sorted by how often they occur. So, right, and it indicates the delta in evaluation. So this was step 7. Add the tactics. Okay. So I mean, I go manually through the course, and I look at tactics that are very important. But I also converted the Lichess puzzle database, which normally is just text with a fen, and I made it searchable. So there are 1.2 million opening puzzles, and I just want to show you how that works, right? So it's not easy, right? If you, for instance, if you are, if you ask ChessBase for relevant puzzles, it's not easy. So this is the way to do it, right? So let me see if So first we have to make sure that Lichess puzzles is being selected as the reference database, right? So you can see notation, right? I go to move 10. So you can see this is just a position in the course, right? And now I can ask for the reference, and it shows me that from this position, right, there are 7 puzzles which come from this position. And then I can, right, normally what I do is like, okay, I sort on ELO, because I mean it shouldn't be like a made in one or something like that. And I can just look through those 7 puzzles, whether there's puzzles that are thematic for the position and that are useful for the students to learn. But you can see, right, I mean this is not the Venn of the puzzle, this is just a position in the course. So I'm searching games and I'm not searching Venns, and I'm getting immediately right, the puzzle. So if you look here, right, you can see this is the starting position and this is how it continues. Okay, here we are, right? And then you can see here what's being played. So this is where it actually starts, right? So black's final move is h6 g4, and then the refutation in this position, right? How it continues is as you can see. I mean, so it would start. Black plays this, white to play and win. Now how does it work, right? So you can see rook takes c8, right? And then rook takes c8, queen takes g4, and in this position white would be winning, right? I mean, rook c2 is not possible, but so the threat is too strong. So you can ask yourself, like, okay, so I have just so this is just one, right? We can look at one more. So here we have, right, which is a starting position. You can see a few more moves being played. And then the question is, here is the position. This is being played, right? It's like white to play and win. So they all originate from course positions. And of course, I can also, if I say, you know, this is too far into the game, I can select and say, I just would like to have only puzzles that occur in the right. I mean, the opening puzzles are up to move 20, but I can just see if there are puzzles which occur earlier, right? So there's here that one occurs earlier. So here we have castle, knight takes f3, this is the line, right? And so here, right, you can see there is a tactic in the position after bishop takes e6. And yeah, I mean, this is of course not so it's just taking the pawn and then there's mate on g7, e7. So you can see basically how I now can search based on the conversion of this puzzle database for specific targets, for specific tactics that are related to this course. So we have critical moves, we have tactics from the course itself. So let's go on. We are on step 8. Then of course I find and annotate model games. Not so easy. Puzzles teach moves, model game teach plans. So I try to find games that show the typical middle game plans and also show how to convert. So that's, and I annotate them by hand, highlighting the moments. And it's like a separate chapter. I write the introduction. That's of course also important. So I explain the repertoire choices, I explain the plans in general, the themes of the course. Normally it's like, several variations with each covering a chapter and the specifics about that chapter. And then, of course, I'm working with Erwin, also our community manager. And then I first have my beta testers, but after the beta testers and everything is complete, I submit it to Chessable, and he comes back with his comments. But I thought, like, okay, this is a bit, you could say, I mean, he has a lot of comments, and then I start editing again, and it will take me a few days. So I thought, you know, let's change it. And I made an authored self-audit checklist. So based on the last reviews by Chessable, I went through all his comments and basically said to Claude, generate a self-audit checklist so I can do it right the first time, and Erwin doesn't have to spend time on these elements. So you can see here all the basically the comments that were made in Chessable reviews summarized. So this is now available for every author. Erwin has it. I mean, I suggested to add it to the Chessable course creation guide. And I think it saves the author time because they can do it right the first time. We have an established standard on top of the course creation guide for specific edits. And if there's like a change in the standards, then you can just update this checklist and distribute it to all the authors. So you can see like the full stops, the capitalization, the square highlighting, right, the space rules. So all created by, summarized by just saying, okay, these were the last 4 courses I submitted. These were all. This was the feedback. This is the course creation guide on Chessable. Now create a self-audit list that can be used by every author. All right, so we're almost there. Let me go to the next one. Aftercare. All right, so there are 2 things, right? So you can see here. So now, right, assume that it has been published, then I do 2 things. The first thing is that what I was missing from Chessable, and they partially compensated for it, is you play online your blitz games, right? And you would like to know what you do wrong, right? So you can see what I created for all my students. They can go here. They fill in their username for Lichess. They can also, if they have a second account, they can fill it in too. And they can say, okay, you know, it's like I'd like to have all my mistakes I made in the last, I don't know, so let's say 18, right? And I say generate practice files for the supercharged Milner-Berry. And then what happens? It is looking and analyzing the games from the 2 platforms. And it generates a file. You can see here, right? So 15 games, the Super Milner-Berry occurred. There were 3 deviations found, and there were 2 practice positions. So if I download it, right, and I open it, so it gives the date. So here they are added, right? So I can show you how it is formatted. So you can see it starts at where the deviation is, right? So black plays queen c7, and it shows which variation it is. It shows that this is the move that should be played, and I played 2 times f4. And so now, right, what you can do if you are a student and you're going to this website, you can just go and create your own online games, puzzles, right? So here are my courses, and you can see for all the deviations, I just created variations that are puzzles, and I can practice them, right? So you can see here, I can just practice them, and I can select if I want to do this as spaced repetition in opening format or as a puzzle. And then I have a good feedback loop on my online games, right? So Nate Solon says basically you have to, right? You have a minimum repertoire, and then you just play games online, and then you update them. Well, here you can have just a Chessable course. You download your deviations from Lichess and chess.com. You can have 4 accounts over the last 6 months, and they are just ready to be uploaded to Chessable with the right header, everything. So that is part 1 of the aftercare. And then the second thing is that, of course, if a course is there for over a year, right? If you're an author, you get a lot of information about courses, about what the students do incorrect. And what I used to do is record videos with the top 10 common mistakes. So if I go to Advanced Control Panel, right, you can see here problem moves. And they are here, right? I mean, if I look at, let's say, the first variation, I can see here, I can sort it by accuracy. So lowest accuracy. So you can see here, right, there are the most common mistakes by students of this course, right? So you can see the repertoire move is rook b1 and knight b4 has been played. I think this is for aftercare, for authors, very good. But this is kind of cumbersome, right? I mean, how do you get this in a format that is usable for the students? So what I did with Claude, right? Because you can see if I go back, right, it's like I don't stay in the program. I have to get back again, and so this is not easy. And it's like you don't have a PGN or anything. This is just, you can go in. I can see it, right? And I mean, I can go in, right? But then what do I do next? I know that, okay, so rook e1 has to be played. They play knight a3. So how do I make this operational? So what I asked Claude to do, the agent, so this is Claude. So the instructions were made by Claude conversational, right? What I showed you here, this is conversational. Then there is, of course, Claude in Chrome. There I used an agent to scrape all this information and make it available in such a way that I can share it with my students. So if you look, for instance, my update to the Advanced Gambit, right? You can see now the 40 most common review mistakes, right? So here we are, right? And you can see here, I just created this as a puzzle. So it says here, right? If you look at, so this is the information that has been given. So this is the position, and you can see what is being played is e5, knight d2, rook e1. And the move in the repertoire is h3. So I make this into a puzzle, and I just give a hint, prevent the pin bishop g4. And so this is another angle for me to have the students learn the opening, so they can see their difficult moves, right? So you can see this is 25,000 attempts. I mean, 75% accuracy, so it's not too low actually. But I think it's useful to have as a puzzle because this is a bit of a positional variation in the whole Advanced Gambit accepted. And I think it's a golden opportunity for authors to come back to their course and say, okay, which variations and which positions do I have to better explain? And to provide to the students, the users of the course, another angle to learning, right? They just can, instead of just doing it as an opening, now they're just confronted with the position, right? It's not that they are in a complete line. They are confronted with a position and they have to, for this position, decide what the best move is. And then it's being explained why that is the best move in this position. And you can see also here, right, for instance, if you play e5, stockfish evaluation is minus 2.1, right? So this is played 2,000 times, so you drop from 0.3 to 2.1, so there's a delta of 2.4 here, right? So e5 just doesn't work here. And you see the reason why. So I hope that this is for students and users helpful for my courses after. So that's part of the aftercare. So we saw two parts of the aftercare. One was find your opening mistakes, look for deviations in your online games, 4 accounts, 6 months back, blitz and higher, no bullet, difficult moves across all users of the course and turning them into puzzles. So, to conclude, right, how do I use Claude? You can see, for me, it's better variations, improved explanations because I have more time, better priority setting because a lot of those things were hard to do, and better learnability, right, because I get more angles. I know better which variations need explanations based on performance on chess.com and Lichess, right? I see what are the critical moves, where students go wrong before I submit. And just some examples, right? So before, if you looked at this whole concept of cumulative probabilities, I used to do that in Excel, right? But it's very cumbersome if you think about how a tree expands and just putting moves into Excel and then putting the frequencies in there and then keeping it tight. I didn't have critical moves. Difficult moves, I couldn't make them operational. When you look at stockfish, right, I would always run it while I was developing the course, but now I just have it readily available. If I look to priority setting, right, it's now I have just a complete algorithm based on cumulative probability, but on top of it, making sure that I don't cut off branches where the parent has a high priority. And then just things like variation headers. I always used to type them by hand, now they're just generated. It's just time savings. And then the ChessBase tactics, right? I mean, there's so many that are irrelevant. And now I have just 1.2 million Lichess puzzles, and I can search based on what is, for every position in the course, I can see what are the puzzles that resulted from this position. So it's game-based and not fan-based. Okay, so I hope this is clear. So for me, it's better design courses, more time for the work that matters. Scandi Slayer has been submitted. I'm working on Buster Sicilian, so this is the deferred Allepin. So it's the delayed Allepin and the deferred Mora Gambit. And I hope that people who are creating courses and co-authors find inspiration by this and say that would be really useful for myself, and that they also make Claude work for them. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you. Bye-bye.